Puppet time. Hey, Sue, I heard there's something really different about you. Yeah, actually, there is. Does it have anything to do with that old man tied up in your bedroom? Oh, no, I let him go a long time ago. I sent him back to the veterans home. Oh, well, I hope you thanked him for his service. Oh, yes, on behalf of a grateful nation. Mm. So what's different? Well, what's different is I don't own a television set. So it's me, the Amish, the Mennonites, and a few crazy survivalists living off the grid. Oh, that's weird. Too weird to go out for Starbucks with me. Oh, you could put a mop bucket on your head. I'd still go out to Starbucks with you. Good, let's go. That's right. I don't own a television, which puts me in the minority. And today, that's one of the things we are going to talk about because we have moved into the 50s. And one of the major influences on our lifestyles as Americans happened in the 1950s, and it happened with the emergence of television. So stick around. We'll talk about that in a minute. Television. Well, television changed the way we live in our homes in a couple of ways. First of all, television, by its very existence, changed how we live. Prior to the advent of television, the living room, or what we know as the living room, was a parlor or a salon. And I guess that depended on what part of the country or maybe what part of the world you lived in. But it was a formal room that you didn't live in. You entertained your guests in that room. You would go into your parlor on Sundays, and that was about it. The children were generally not welcome there. It was a formal room that was not used for family living. When television came along, all of a sudden, people were gathered around the TV set, and the living room became a place you lived in. And that was one of the major changes. The other change, yes, baby, get your little tail out of there. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're back. The other major change was television showed us how other families lived. Hollywood decided to show us what real Americans lived like. Now, of course, these weren't real Americans. These were people like Ozzie and Harriet and their family. It was Father Knows Best. It was Leave It to Beaver. And it was the daytime dramas, the soap operas, or as my mother would say, my shows. Yep. They brought this into our homes and gave us that whole let's keep up with the Joneses mentality. They showed us not how other people lived, but how we were supposed to live, what our homes and our rooms were supposed to look like. So when we talk about an era like the 50s, which is what we're discussing today, what we need to remember is that all this beautiful, fabulous atomic furniture was not what we were seeing on Father Knows Best. It was not what we were seeing on the Ozzie and Harriet show. We were seeing very, very traditional rooms. Ozzie and Harriet had furniture that looked like it came out of the 1940s with Windsor chairs at the dining table and floral sofas, and they did not have the sleek lines that were catching on elsewhere. So television was a big, big factor. In 1950, fewer than 10% of American households owned a television. By 1960, it was over 85%. In that one decade, it jumped from being an expensive high-tech toy for the wealthy to being in 85% of American homes. Now, television caught on in the 50s. In 1950, fewer than 10% of Americans owned televisions, but that was okay because it was not broadcasting all day long. Shows, they didn't have shows as we know. We have sitcoms and dramas, and they were sporadic. There were news programs. There were almost anybody who could get a broadcasting license could put whatever they wanted on television. And they didn't even have regular programming schedules. So television grew and became very, very systematized along with the growth in sales. As the market grew, television caught up with its audience. So by the late 50s, it was a force in our lives. Now, television is interesting because I'm going to show you some pictures of some televisions from the 1950s, and you're going to get a chance to see this. The actual box that became part of our living rooms started off looking like a piece of furniture. They were modeled after the radios, and when you look at the oldest televisions, you see that. It's almost as if someone stuck a TV screen on an old upright radio. And then they turned from furniture, the way the radios were, into appliances. They started looking like washing machines. And that was a fairly large period in the 50s when they looked like appliances. And that went through the 60s as well. But then they got back to looking like furniture again, so that by the time you get into the 70s, it was this giant console monstrosity in the middle of your living room that was bigger than your sofa, and it had a life of its own. You had TV lamps, TV panthers. Sometimes they were lamps, sometimes they were just panthers, sometimes they were planters. You get whole sets of these. It's like, look, these are my two TV panthers, and they're on top of my TV. And I can remember my mother had special figurines that sat on the TV. And when my father objected to them because he just found them distasteful, she picked up the figurines off the living room television, brought them into the bedroom, and stuck them on top of the portable television. That's how rigid it was in people's minds, that these were TV figurines. It seems it never occurred to her to put them on a sideboard or something. So let's take a look at this and watch the progression. Furniture to appliances, back to furniture again. Okay, so this is this huge novel thing. And we gathered around it. We worshipped it like a little god. It was just, we might as well have given it votive offerings. Major, major change. But it also changed, in addition to changing the way we used our living room, formerly known as the parlor, changed the way we decorated it too. Prior to the 1950s, for the first half of the 20th century, we had gotten away from furniture suites, from large ensembles of furniture that all matched. That was a very Victorian thing, by the way. We were not the first to invent it. The Victorians had these elaborate things, and when we get into Victorian furniture, we are going to talk about that, because I'll tell you, they took their furniture very seriously. The Victorians took everything very seriously. But boy, when they furnished a room, they furnished a room. We'd gotten away from that. In the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, when rooms were put together, because I wouldn't go so far as to say they were decorated. That's a later concept. But when people organized their parlor, they were not doing it the same way. Furniture was much more individualized, purchased separately, not as large suites. The 50s come along, and bang, we're back to suites, because we needed that big sofa. In the 40s, as we're going to see when we get into the 40s, it was much more likely for us to have a collection of armchairs. That was the 40s thing. Yes, there might be a sofa. Sofas were not invented in the 1950s. They, in fact, date back to ancient Egypt. But in the 40s, it was chairs. Nice, comfortable chairs, a place where you would invite your guests. They would come, they would sit down, everybody's happy. But with the whole family gathering in the living room, you needed different kinds of seating. This is the point where we start getting into furniture suites. Now, in the early 50s, a furniture suite consisted of a sofa and a chair. Sometimes it would be a sectional sofa and a chair, two pieces of a sofa. It was as if they cut the sofa in half, stuck a little end table in it, and they'd wrap around the corner, and there would be a chair, and they matched. And that was the thing. They were just two pieces, or maybe three pieces, but they were matching furniture. And then later, as the 50s wore on, they turned into three pieces. You would have a sofa and a chair that matched the sofa, same style, same colors, and then the third chair, which was the accent chair. And that third chair would be a different color, and not just a little different. That third chair was a completely different color family. So if your sofa and matching chair were blue, that third chair would be yellow, it would be red, it was really what they called accent, I would call clashing. That's the way it was. And this is how people lived. Some other interesting things. Furniture was usually shoved up against a wall. Furniture being moved away from walls is a relatively modern concept, because furniture, this is going back to the federal period, lined the perimeter of the room. For some reason, they wanted a lot of nice empty space in the middle of their room, with the exception of the giant table they have in the middle of it, but we'll get into that later. But this is when it happened. This is when furniture became the sofa two-chair combination that we are familiar with today. And of course, you would have your tables. And the table would be a coffee table and two end tables. The end tables would invariably go on either end of the sofa, and the chairs would be somewhat near those tables so they could access them if they needed to. And then on the opposite wall from the sofa was the television. So how about we take a look at furniture suites? Now, one of the things I want you to notice when I do this is the final picture in this next set of pictures is the later set, the sofa and two chairs as opposed to one. And the last picture is this chair, the one that's right behind me, which is part of a larger set. I actually took that chair out of a larger set and said, hey, I'll buy the chair, but I don't want the rest of it. This was, in fact, the accent chair as well. But I want you to take a look at the next to last picture, which is a real set of furniture from the 1950s, and then look at my chair and you'll see. Same thing. Okay, here we go. Now, this was the way people were living. And as I say, largely influenced by that giant squat box in the middle of the room. Oh, and it eventually came to include a hi-fi stereo system. It just expanded. It was like a giant growing beast, just got bigger and bigger and incorporated more stuff. But I have some more pictures of very typical furniture from the 1950s. And this furniture, I actually did cherry pick this. I was looking for traditional but more modern pieces, because up till now, we've been looking just at very traditional, what's been in most homes. But in the 50s, you started to see some changes. One of the changes is the legs of furniture. It became fashionable to show the legs. It became fashionable to have wooden arms on the chairs as well. And so I want you to take a look at these, because these are pictures of more modern. We're not quite getting into the atomic yet. This is more modern, but still traditional 1950s rooms. So as you can see, there's a pattern to this. It was, despite the fact that they had broken away from the traditional a little more, it was, in fact, less individual than the rooms of the 20s, of the 30s, of the 40s, because those rooms were more likely to have been assembled piece by piece individually. Mother's chair, father's chair, they would not have necessarily even been bought at the same store. So we're starting to see that sort of regimentation. And again, we owe that to television. They were showing us interiors that were designed by Hollywood set designers, and they were showing us suites of furniture, rooms that had a sort of common design theme. They were not just a hodgepodge of slapped together. There, there was a design theme to them. And this is where we really started getting that into our lives. Now, there are some other things that are really great about the 50s. And mind you, like I said, we haven't even gotten into Atomic yet. We're going to save that for tomorrow. Formica. Now, I have a collection of some great pictures of Formica tables and chairs. And although most of these were probably in kitchens, many of them would have been in dining rooms as well. And one of the things I hope you will notice in this collection of pictures is red. Cherry red was the hot color. But you're going to see blues, you're going to see yellows, you're going to see whites, greens. I've even seen some of these in lavender. It was just about every color in the rainbow. And of course, they all had common elements: the heavy chrome banding, the matching vinyl chairs. When we think of 1950s furniture, I'm sure this is one of the things that simply jumps out at us. It leaps into the forefront of our minds. So let's take a look at Formica. Okay, so this is what we have, and this is how people were living. And I hope you noticed that even though most of the pictures I showed you were magazine ads or illustrations, many of them were actual room layouts. And these are genuine rooms from the period, because I didn't want to get into recreations. I think one of the images was a recreation room, and I included it because it was just a really very good job. They really captured the essence of it. This is who we were in terms of our decorating space in the 1950s. Now, furniture at that time was well made. Even those Formica tables, you can find them all over the place. Jocelyn just got one not too long ago. Really nice condition. And by the way, if you decide you want to get a Formica chair set, make sure the chrome is in good shape. And the reason why is because in order to have a piece re-chromed, you have to go to a special shop, because the chemicals and the processes they use are very, very toxic. And what that means is that a re-chromer, a business that specializes in restoring chrome, has to have a special license. And those licenses are not easy to come by, and you do not find these shops on every street corner. So make sure you deal well with the chrome, because replacing vinyl upholstery is not all that hard, but replacing that chrome, boy, that's going to be a job. So that's just a keep in mind for those of you who are interested in collecting these things. That's your watch point: good chrome. Formica can be replaced. Chrome, no. That's one of those things, just don't even bet that you're going to be able to find someone in your area that can do it. So that is, in effect, what we have in our living spaces in the 1950s. And you can see how the changes have really occurred. So briefly, let us recap, because we have covered 70 years. From the 1950s, which we've dealt with today, bright, bright colors on the Formica, bright colors in the furniture, and wildly contrasting colors too. Living room set that will be, a red sofa and chair and combined with a green chair. That was a very common combination. Those houses must have looked like Christmas Day. We go from that over to the florals and the more subdued colors of the 60s into the bizarre colors, fuchsia chartreuse of the late 60s, which was a little blip on the radar. And we discussed that. That wasn't in every home. That was much more likely to be seen in the movies or in the teenager's bedroom. We go into the 80s, the 90s, the early 21st century, dull as dirt. So we've had a transition. Our high points of color are really in the middle of the century. In my personal opinion, that's when things were, I don't want to say at their most interesting, but definitely on the list of top level interesting stuff. So tomorrow we are going to get into atomic, because that's where the 50s really shines, but it's entitled to a little episode all of its own, because the things are just so spectacular and so impressive. And we need to talk about that because there's a lot of sociology wrapped up in the atomic 50s as well as just decorating. So let's do a little bookkeeping giveaway. The koi plate, I'm going to let that run one more day because I know a lot of you wanted to get your listings in. So 24 more hours. Tomorrow morning we'll end it. So that's an addition of one day. I want that koi platter, whatever. I know some of you are reluctant to say, give me that. I want that. Say it any way you want. Just make sure I know what you're looking for. The winner of the compact, that was from last week, is going to be announced tomorrow. Mary Anderson, the winner of the elephant, that was the giveaway. That was from Karen Hopper, as was the compact. And she is the jewelry refabricator, just repurposing these things. Mary, please get in touch with me. If I do not hear from you in 1 week, that elephant's going up for grabs again. Too many people wanted it for me to just let it sit. One more. This piece, and some of you will remember this, Lisa from DesertDragonworks. This one, the winner had not claimed the piece, and I will show you a nice close-up photo of this. This one, give me that steampunk necklace, and it's yours. And again, this is going to just be a one-day giveaway. We are back on track with our pens, with our puppets. Those giveaways are going on. So remember, in the comments, give me that pen, give me that sock puppet, and we're just going to keep these things going. Okay. Tomorrow, atomic 50s. And boy, have I got some pictures for you. Meantime, have a great day, and I'll see you then.